Want to do better? Then it's time to change the story. Welcome to our show about new visions currently transforming the world through the confluence of art, tech, and innovation. And now your hosts, Michael Ashley and Neil Sahota.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Changing the Story. Got an incredible guest today, DeShuna Elisa Spencer. She's the founder and CEO of kweliTV, which celebrates global Black culture through curated, undiscovered, and award-winning indie films, documentaries, web series, children's programming, and events. She's a former radio host and producer of Empower Hour, a show that examines social justice issues affecting people of color on Washington, D.C.'s 89.3 FM WPFW. DeShuna recently completed her first documentary, Mom Interrupted, which she tackles gun violence through the stories of the ones most impacted, the mothers of murdered young Black men and women. In 2019, the Digital Diversity Network named her the Innovation and Inclusion Social Entrepreneur of the Year. Thank you for being a champion for diversity, and welcome to the show, DeShuna.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So DeShuna, as a visionary, what is the story that you would like to bring to the world?
For me, the story I like to bring to the world is authenticity. Like that's, the whole mission of everything I've done. You mentioned the bio kweliTV in the beginning. Kweli means truth. And so for me, it's been really important for me to showcase authentic storytelling, using it to celebrate the community, use it to heal the community as well as empower the community.
That's awesome. So DeShuna, how did you get started? I mean, what triggered this in your life to say, I got to do this?
It was really simple. Back in the day, I was watching cable when I had cable, and I was flipping through a bunch of channels, and I didn't really see anything I wanted. I feel like, especially back in the day, there were like 1,000 channels. You flip, and it's like the same stuff over and over again. And I like history and I like discovery. If you turn on those channels, basically you wouldn't see the Black people at all. Like there is Black history, right? And even in February, you kind of have to search really hard to find Black history stories, even on the History Channel. And a lot of times you watch the reality television, the Black women were fighting each other, or if you saw some of the throwback 90s movies that we all love, it always showed the same narrative about the Black experience, the hood, someone getting showered, someone trying to get out the hood, and they're maybe doing something illegal, and before they get a chance to say their lies, they get shot at the end. It's always the same type of storyline. And those stories actually depressed me. And so I wanted to see something more. And I got a subscription service to a very popular streaming service. And I was looking for these really great independent films that I read about online. And when I didn't see those films, I was like, okay, where are they? And I realized that I had to go to a film festival to see them. It's like, well, I don't want to I can't afford to travel to a film festival, number one. And so that's when the wheels start to turn. It's like, okay, if this doesn't exist anywhere, then I'm going to create this, which is insane because I had no experience in it. I didn't know what I was doing. Kind of went in blind, trying to figure it out.
When Neil was reading your bio, you said this word authentic, and I wondered what that means to you. When you're talking about this authentic experience, that totally makes sense that there's a lot of other movies out there that are telling the same kind of story. But when we're talking about authentic, what does that mean to you?
So it means basically telling the truth, not good or bad, right? I mean, we know that authentic can also, I don't want to sugarcoat the Black community either. I think people think everything has to be positive. We're not saying we only want to show positive stories, just want to show stories that there's not laced in stereotypes or are demeaning to the community. Yeah. So for instance, one time we got this submission. It had been a film festival. It was about Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and somehow they came back to life, and they, were looking at the Black community, and they were all ashamed because all the pants were sagging and all the negativity. And we know that every community has a negative side to it, but they only showed that side. And so Malcolm X and Martin Luther King were upset and dumbfounded by the fact that the Black community was in disarray since they died. And then they met some Black man whose pants were sagging, and cursed and cursed him out, called Malcolm X the N-word, and I was like, what? So stories like that, and this was a Black director who did this film, and I, said, sorry, like this doesn't fit our mission because it's not authentic. I grew up in Memphis, born and raised, and I even lived next door to a drug dealer at one point in my life, and they were still respectful to elders. I mean, it wasn't so like negative, and I felt it was a very misrepresentation about people who are maybe living impoverished in the Black community. And so that's what authentic means. It means like we want to tell the truth. We don't want to, over stereotype a particular our community, which sometimes tends to happen quite a bit. Or the angry Black woman, right? That's another stereotype. So if I see something where it's really heavily towards, girl, you know what, I mean, yeah, we all have our sister friends, we get together and we have fun, but at the same time, everyone's not rolling their necks, and everyone doesn't have long nails out the here, like, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? But that we need to show other sides of our community, and I really feel like mainstream can sometimes really skew it towards one way. Mm-hmm. And it's so important to me because you think about what's happening, on a global scale, or even in the U.S., where you see, Black men being murdered, and even the slightest thing, people automatically assume that like they're guilty. That to me it stems from what we see in the media. If the media tends to show negative stereotypes constantly about Black men, then when people see Black men, they're going to automatically assume the worst because of the images that they see, and studies show that to be true. And so my goal is to really counteract that by telling authentic stories, for showing different types of storylines. And that's what being authentic means. It doesn't mean sugarcoating anything that's going on in the community, but really being truthful and show all sides of our community, not just one side, so people have a more well-balanced opinion about what it means to be Black.
Yeah. That is incredibly powerful. And I guess to me, it's surprising, right? That it seems like if we're over stereotyping people, shouldn't people, like the people making the films or the TV shows, wherever it is, realize that and say, hey, we're kind of doing the same thing over and over again, right or wrong? When do they realize that we got to change it up, or mix it up and say, like, look, not everyone acts like this, and we may be actually teaching people bad things or teaching them stereotyping that, is going to seep in their brains.
That's a really interesting point. I think it boils down to what studios and people and those in charge think will sell. If a certain thing sells, right, people they're gonna keep making it. If you think like Coca-Cola, we know that sodas are really bad for you, and so even though they have like the other types of juices, people will automatically go to soda, and they're gonna sell that more than anything because they think, oh, that's what people want. People are really afraid of change. People are really afraid of trying out new things because for them, they just want to make their money. They want to get their return on their investment. And they think return on investment means this worked for the last movie. Like you look at the 90s, every Black movie was literally Boys in the Hood, Menace 2. I mean, I like those movies and back in the day I was a kid, but they all higher learning. They all had the same story, literally, someone getting shot, crime in the communities. And I felt like because that was a success, then every movie that came out afterwards pretty much was the same thing. And so now you see a lot of the superhero movies, right? That's where it seems to be, because they're so successful. Okay, well, we're afraid to try something new. We're just gonna, every angle of superhero movie, we're just gonna put it out because we know people are gonna go to the box office. So I really think it's more fear of trying something new because they're afraid they may not make their money back. Versus like, I care about stereotypes. It's really more about the money versus the mission.
Right. And I think that for a lot of people, I graduated from film school, worked in Hollywood, and I felt very discouraged because they want to play it safe. They want to do sequels. They want to do endless comic book movies. I mean, God, how many of those we have to watch? People just get tired of it. But I know that they want to be very safe about what they're doing. They're trying to make their money. For you and the creative output that you're involved in, what are some of the stories right now that either you're working on or about to come out that you're really excited about that actually tells that authentic narrative that gets you excited?
Sure. So we're not creating content quite yet. It's very expensive to do it well. And so right now our main focus is on supporting our independent filmmakers who have content on our platform. We just released a slate of new films. One great film is called Let the Fire Burn. It's about what happened in the 80s with the MOVE, Black Liberation Organization in Philly, where they basically just let people die. It was really great. It's a really great documentary about how the government can overstretch their boundaries and murder innocent people in the community. Another documentary has been out on the platform for a while. It's called Wilmington on Fire. Some people are starting to learn about the Tulsa incident where a white mob killed a number of African Americans after slavery because they were jealous that they were trying to build something for themselves. And something similar happened in Wilmington, North Carolina. In this documentary from an independent filmmaker, he's from North Carolina. He did the research himself and did a phenomenal documentary. That documentary is so important because a lot of times, and as I mentioned earlier, when it comes to our history, those things are pretty much laced over. And so as people talk about, some of the broader terms about, how do we fix systematic racism, implicit bias, and people think about it from a now terms, but there have been so many other Wilmington, so many other Tulsa incidents in other parts of the country, like in Memphis, where I'm from originally. I live in DC area now, but there was these lynchings that happened. There was this really robust Black middle class that some people didn't like existed, and a bunch of professional Black men, business owners, were lynched during this time. And so again, these are stories you don't really hear about because it's a tainted history, but it's so important for us to know. And then if you think about it now, that's why it's harder sometimes for Black people to get ahead, because those things that happened, like there were businesses, there was generational wealth that was being built, but because of things that happened where there were mobs killing Black people because of it, now we're sort of seeing sort of the ramifications up till today. And so those are just some of the types of programming. We also have positive stuff too, like we don't want everything to be all doom and gloom, like, oh my God, I'm gonna cry every film that I see. But we also, really want to show really positive views about Africa. Growing up, I remember only thing I knew about Africa as a kid was like I see the Ethiopian commercials where they were really thin and they were malnourished, and or people, there were child soldiers. Hear about the conflicts happening, or HIV/AIDS was another thing as a kid when I was growing up. And so our goal is to show other sides of Africa, and it's a really great comedy on kweliTV called Africa United. It's about a group of kids who they want to go to the World Cup in South Africa. They live in Rwanda, they live in Uganda, and their goal is to travel to South Africa, and it's a long trek, and they travel by different ways, by walking, by boat, they just travel so many different ways. But it's funny, and it doesn't. They're not like helpless or hopeless. Like it's a very positive story about a group of kids who just want to see the World Cup. They're not. So I mean, and sometimes people tend to think if we're going to talk about Africa, it's through this white lens, almost like a National Geographic narration type of thing, right? And so we want to show something different. And so those are just some of the titles. We have so many others on the platform that I want people to check out.
Excellent.
That's a lot of amazing stories, and Michael and I believe that everyone has a story to tell, and hopefully a story that they want to share. Given that there's like such a big universe of stories out there, how do you figure out what to use? What content is going to be the most impactful?
It's interesting because we get submissions from people. People from filmmakers reach out to us who say, "Hey, I have a friend who has a film that's already on a platform." We work with distributors, but for us, once a month we put out the new content. We try to make it really well-rounded. Like for instance, this month we have a romance, we have a romantic comedy, we have some really great documentaries, places around the world. We have a documentary about the Panama Canal and how people from Trinidad went to Panama to build this canal, and some of the challenges that they faced. things you would never hear about, right? Stories you'll never see. And so I really like mixing up something from the US, a little bit from the Caribbean, some things from Africa, some things from Europe, all different types of genres, really making a well-rounded package, I like to say. But it is hard choosing, the content, because we get a lot of submissions and we wish we can take everything, and we're super focused on our mission when we select content. So that goes a lot into what we choose to put on the platform.
So this moment in history is very chaotic. We know there's a lot going on in the news, especially after the George Floyd murder. What are your thoughts about what you're seeing day to day on the news about what's going on in your community and in the wider community of America? First part of that question. And two, how can we begin to tell stories that are authentic, but that help us to get away from division and more towards unity at this moment in time?
That's a good question. So the first one, it's been really hard, right? I think that there's so much going on in the world, and I think one of the things I've noticed is that some of my white friends have been empathetic about really just trying to take a step back and say, okay, DeShuna, is this really, and the thing is, most people don't realize that if you are a Black person or even a person of color, because I think people of color have their own ranges of what racism they experience. Mm-hmm. And as a Black woman or a Black person in general, there are things that most of us, we don't really talk about. Like, most of us experience some form of implicit bias, discrimination, racism on a constant basis. You just don't mention it because you're going to be like, oh, there they go complaining again. So you just kind of just let it go, and not let it go, but you just kind of move on and try to, make do with what hand you're dealt. And I'm noticing that my white friends are definitely saying, hey, DeShuna, what's going on? And really want to have open dialogue about my experiences. And a lot of them have been really shocked, like, oh, I never knew. Like, yeah, but we would spend hours upon hours, today, this will happen to me, So you just sort of, you're so used to it that, you just know it is what it is. But what I will say is that it's been pretty much very much so draining, I think, because of the pandemic, and then seeing how Black people are even more impacted by this as well, by the coronavirus, more likely to die from this too. It's like another thing that we're more likely to be impacted by negatively. It takes a toll, right? And I even found myself a little bit depressed just because of everything that's happening. I chose not to watch the George Floyd video. I saw like the first 3 minutes of it, but I mentally just couldn't watch it. Same thing with Jacob Blake. I try not to watch it. I'm scrolling through Twitter, and Twitter automatically plays stuff as you scroll through, and I was trying to scroll past it. I know what happened to him. I just don't want to see it. Black people are tired of seeing Black death. Like, we're just over and over again. And these are stories that become national, international news. There's so many other stories that don't make news, right? And another thing too is that, I feel like people do care now, but like for Black people, it's something we've been dealing with for so long. I remember when I can't think of his name, he was killed like 2004, Sean Bell. It was the day before his wedding in New York, and some unmarked cops killed him during his bachelor party, unarmed, doing nothing wrong, just come back from a bachelor party. That crushed me. And so that was like that was like 2004, 2005, we're thinking 15, 20 years ago, and now we're still going through this. Now moving forward, how can we come together? That's an interesting question, because I know like my friends who are empathetic and want to understand the plight. I think it's easier to have these white allies who are like, okay, wow, okay, I'm really starting to understand that this not racism thing is really much larger than I had anticipated. Mm-hmm. But then there are those who will never see the light. We have advertising on like Twitter, and most of the advertising comments are very negative, like with the people, with the MAGA people. And I'm not trying to pick sides, but they used to have, I look at their page and their personal page, and they see the most negative, hateful things about kweliTV. And I always tell people, like, we're not being separatists. We're not saying if you are white, you can't subscribe. We welcome everyone to come. We think that the stories that we have on kweliTV can heal not just our community, but can heal others. They can understand our community better. And so I think that having these conversations more would be, really helpful. Even talking to my brother, he was, being from Memphis, and his coworkers in Memphis were having conversations with him, and them not really understanding, them being more empathetic about him, what he goes through as a Black man. I think it's been really positive in that sense. My hope is that these conversations continue to happen, that it's not just a flavor of the month and then next month is something else. If you think about like Me Too, I feel like that sort of died down a bit and people aren't talking about it as much. And so I think that we should always be more empathetic and caring or be kind. That's like, that we should just all try to be more, just be kinder. I feel like we've been doing this year a little bit more just because of the pandemic, where when someone sends an email, hey, just check and hope everything's okay before getting to business. Yeah. I hope that kind of sticks around, because we just never know what people are going through. And I think for people who aren't Black, just never really could fully understand what Black people go through on a regular basis, like every single day, just to exist.
Sure.
I think telling these stories is actually really important. And I like the balance on, you got to tell the bad and the good, because, I did watch those videos and I was horrified that you couldn't believe another person would do that to another person. And then I got angry about that someone would do that. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think for people that don't understand what's happening in the communities, it's kind of those powerful things. But then what I really found inspirational was you hear more about the stories about what the families, what the communities are doing and the support. And I'm like, wow, this is not just great. It's like, I kind of wish my community was more like that, that we had some of these things. I'm not saying anyone should suffer such horrible things, right. But just on a day-to-day basis, how come we're not just a little bit better to each other, a little bit more supportive? There seems to be a lot of a little pent-up hostility or anger on such stupid stuff.
Right.
I mean, do we have a way out? Is there some stories maybe we can tell? And, I hate to put it this way, turn some lemons to lemonade and maybe put an end to, the injustice, but also make all of us just better people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good question. I feel like social media in one way has really exposed a lot of the prejudice that I think a lot of people thought maybe went away. Right. I mean, I grew up in the 90s, and I remember thinking like, wow, Clinton's in office and, our parents were doing, but I just feel like that was like a glaze over when it came to racism. I was really in this bubble living in a Black city. The white people who I knew were nice. I never really experienced anything overtly racist, growing up. And then I go to college in Mississippi, and my life is turned upside down. Like, whoa, I guess racism still exists, And then working on my first job here in the DC area, and how the implicit bias I experienced was just jarring to me, and I was like really hurt by it all. And so it was just something that I was like, well, what can we do? How? And I think it really starts with the allies having conversations first, because we're going to really need the allies. There's really nothing that, besides showing more of the videos, I don't know what more we can do, because even with George Floyd, there are still people who were like, he must have done something. Just making up the most insane things to justify him being murdered. There was just no justification to have him. He's lying there. Just to be on his neck for that long, there's actually no justification for someone to shoot someone in the back. There's just no justification. I just don't understand. And there are people who would never see that. But I think there are more people who are open to that. We just need to get to them, because you can't change everybody. Something I wish I've always thought you can change everybody, but there are some people that you may not be able to change. But if there are enough of us who are open to change, open to listening, then we will be the majority, and then they will be the minority over time.
And speaking of helping people to change, if you were to give advice to young filmmakers, young storytellers right now who do want to influence people for the good, they want to tell those types of stories that we've been talking about, what would your advice be to them to get started?
I would say just don't be afraid. Don't ask for permission. I think, talking with a lot of filmmakers, some of the challenges that they talk about is I need this studio, I need this whoever to greenlight my ideal. And as we talked about earlier, if those ideals sometimes stem in prejudice, implicit bias, and stereotypes, then they may not get the green light. And so my thing is do it anyway. Don't worry about, will the studios like this? Will the studios want this? Do what you think will have the biggest impact in your community and tell a story that you want to tell that's authentic to you. And I think you will be successful, and don't really worry about the if we listen to, like when I started kweliTV, people are telling me Black people don't want to watch documentaries. You should have a ratchet channel. You should have Real Housewives, whatever. Like that's what people want to watch. And documentaries, that's our number one genre. That's what people are asking to watch more than anything. And so if I would have listened to what other people said, we would have been like any other platform, right? Our goal is to be different. Our goal is to amplify and honor and celebrate, not just to be like everyone else. And so that to me is one way for filmmakers. It may be harder to get the funding that you need, but now with technology, with an iPhone, the sky's the limit nowadays. Yeah. You can do a lot with an iPhone and a dream.
Right. That's great.
That's, I think, fantastic advice, DeShuna. I mean, I love it. Tell your story, make the impact you want to do. Not worry too much. Sounds like if you're authentic, you'll be successful.
Right.
Well, with that, DeShuna, if people want to learn more about kweliTV, they want to learn about you, want to figure out how to tell their story, what's the best way to connect with you, follow what's going on, and hopefully make an impact?
Sure. So they can go to our website and check us out. It's www.kweli.tv. We're on IG, we're on Facebook or Instagram. People are like, what's IG? We're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at kwelitv. And you can email me at hello@kweli.tv.
Wonderful.
Awesome. We'll make sure all that information is in the show notes for our audience. Shauna, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, DeShuna. Hey, if you like today's show, please remember to hit the like button and leave a comment.
If you've been enjoying the Changing the Story podcast series, please subscribe and share it with your friends.
Thank you.